Excellent. I don't have any well, I do have hot drama. This whole episode is going to be hot drama.
I know we shouldn't start too early.
I know. I'll just start. Did you do anything fun this week? Could be personal, could be work.
This week. No, this week's been a blur. It's been busy at work.
Really?
Played a little Zelda, a lot of PTO type stuff.
Still working on that Zelda.
Dude, that game is so long. Yeah.
It is a big game. Are you a Harry Potter fan? Harry Potter is also a big
Never
game.
read a book, never watched a movie.
Wow. And you're holding to it, aren't you?
No, not necessarily. Actually, we talked about the plan was we were going to go to Harry Potter World in Universal, but then decided against that whole thing. And if we were going to do that, I told my wife we should at least like watch the movies together or something.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you?
The game's big. So I was at a conference in San Francisco, went to GraphQL Conf and did a workshop there. So actually, I think I can say that it's over. It's the first workshop I've done. So I've spoken at conferences, but that's the first workshop. I think it went well. There were people there all across the spectrum. Like there were people that were like, I already know this. And then other people that were like, oh my goodness, can you please go slower? Say that again. I don't understand.
It was a workshop on GraphQL?
So my workshop specifically was on React Server Components and Redwood. And so they are still doing a lot of work with React Server Components. So I kind of split the workshop. Actually, there's no kind of. I did split the workshop into 2 segments. So the first part, I was showing how GraphQL works with Redwood. And then the second segment, I showed all the experimental stuff that we've been doing with React Server Components. So,
man, okay. Oh, maybe we should save this for the episode too, because server components are one of those things where I'm like, we should not be caring about them.
Strong opinions.
Yeah.
I saw your tweet about it. Yeah, we'll save it. I did want to shout out the chat. So DMD boy, maybe. James does look different. He grew out his hair. Actually, that would probably be you.
Yep.
Brad's
put on a hat
now, by the way. We made it official. We committed. So Brad is a regular host. We just got to add him to the website.
Yeah.
This will come up because I've been migrating it over to Remix.
Yeah. Oh, can't wait to talk about that.
Hey, Todd. Good to see ya. I need to figure out what conferences we're going to overlap at. And then Parasocial, you hate Harry Potter. We'll still be friends. It's fine.
DMD, I don't work on Jira. I work on Confluence, actually.
There you go.
Yeah.
And what is happening? I think the entire React community right now is like, what is happening? And Svelte is also interesting too. They dropped some big news. Did you see that?
Yeah. But like, I'm not as hooked into Svelte. Man, I really wanted Aiden to come on this morning because one of the questions that I wanted to ask him is that, for context, Aiden is the creator of Million.js, the library that makes React 70% faster by essentially imposing some limitations. And like one of the things I really wanted to ask him, and this is like a teaser, Aiden, if you're listening for a tough question, is the half of what Million does is like make the React reconciler a little bit faster by eliminating some edge cases. And I wanted to ask him, like, what do you think about frameworks that just sidestep this problem entirely, like Svelte? Were you writing this going like, man, I should just start using Svelte,
Yeah.
Or moreover, like, what were you writing or working on that React was that slow that you were like, I need to make the reconciler faster?
Yeah. So Aiden will be joining us in 2 weeks.
Cool.
So he rescheduled for October is that the 6th? Yes.
I'm gonna. Oh man, I think we'll be. I think we'll be at the magical place.
Yeah. Very magical. Oh, fun. Okay, so Todd's gonna be at Magnolia, which was one of my favorite conferences that I went to last year. I would just encourage anybody that is in the area of Mississippi to go to Magnolia, and it's Halloween themed this year, which is super fun.
Cool.
And then Connect Tech.
Anybody decided on Halloween costumes for this year?
Yeah.
What are you guys doing?
This is the first year ever we've done a family theme, and I'm so excited about it. So you probably don't watch the show. Have you ever seen Miraculous? It's like Ladybug and Cat Noir. I'll include a link in the description. I need to do some research to figure out exactly where the show came from because it's on Disney. The newer episodes are all on Disney Plus, but a lot of the like early episodes were on Netflix, and Netflix just released like its own a movie. So it's slightly unrelated to at least the new episodes that Disney's put out. So I'm not sure, like in terms of rights, who owns it or what studio is putting it together. But it's 3D animated, but there's kind of like this anime feel to it. My kids love it, and I kind of love it too. Hold on, I'm getting links. I'm just not doing a good job of talking.
Oh, I've like seen the.
Let's see, where is a good link here? I'm getting a Wikipedia page, which would probably be good to watch at some point. I'm like, here, I'll just include my. Let me just do a Google search for everybody. There you go. Oh, perfect. Christian just said it's a French studio. That makes sense because it takes place in Paris. But the main character is a girl. Her name is Marinette, and she has this like little, I don't even remember what they call it, but it's like this little thing that kind of follows her around, and it gives her superpowers, and it turns her into a ladybug, which doesn't sound like a superhero, but she's pretty cool. And then her what is it? Co-star, can you say it? That's a cartoon. Is a dude, and he has a little character that follows him around that turns him into a cat. So he's Cat Noir and Ladybug. And there's other little characters that their friends will get and turn them into superheroes. So anyways, my daughter is going to be Ladybug. My son is going to be Cat Noir. And then my other daughter and I are going to be the like two other characters. So she's a fox and I'm a bee. Queen Bee is the name. And then my husband is going to be a hawk moth, who's the evil guy. So he has like this purple coat and a cane. So anyways, it'll be fun.
Dads always get to be the bad guys. It's kind of fun.
Well, what's funny is, so the bad guy, they call it akumatized, where he takes like he turns people kind of bad. Like if somebody gets jealous or hurt about something, he will take those feelings and like multiply them times 1,000, so they turn into bad guys. And they say that they're akumatized. And so originally we weren't sure what character I was going to be. So I was like, well, maybe I can be akumatized. Which when you start Googling all the villains, it's kind of funny.
Huh.
But I'll have to share pictures eventually.
We're doing a family theme this year too, and it's kind of the first time we're doing one. Everybody's super into Mario this year, so we're just going all out on Mario characters.
Yes. Who are you going to be?
I'm going to be Luigi. My son's going to be Mario.
Awesome.
And I
can't
remember who's going to be Daisy and Peach. Some like either my wife or my daughter is going to be Daisy or Peach.
Fun. Oh, that's perfect. What's up, Eric? Mark? Rivero or Riviero? How would you pronounce that? Rivero. Rivero.
I'm actually surprised how many comments come through the YouTube live stream.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, well let's get started.
Sweet.
Ish. Oh yeah, I can do an intro with music. Usually James is the one that has to control it, but I did load all that stuff into StreamYard. Okay, so I'll kick us off officially. Welcome to another episode of Compressed FM, a podcast all about web design and development with a little bit of zest. Today we will have all the water cooler talk, all the drama. We're so excited to get going. And without further ado,
web development and design, who would have guessed? Well, we can do them both, even add a little zest. So turn up the volume, get ready for the best. Let's get it started in this episode of Compress.
Awesome. Hello, my name is Amy Dutton. I am a lead maintainer on the Redwood JS core team.
Hey, and I'm Brad Garapi. I work on Confluence at Atlassian.
Awesome. And today we have all the hot drama.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start?
Man,
Some of these things you brought up, I don't know about, so I'm looking forward to hearing your take on it. Yep.
Okay. I mean, maybe we'll just go down the list. I think just hitting on like, current news topics. One of the big things that happened lately was DHH, which I never remember his name. David Heineman or something.
Rails guy.
There was a PR put up somewhere. I don't even know where it was now. I keep forgetting. There's a PR put up where they were going to remove TypeScript from a project. Yes. But this also did a lot of other like really weird things, like pull out the prettier configuration and things like that. And like it's really weird because they weren't transitioning to some other kind of type system. They were ripping out types altogether, which is just bad for user experience, internal development, you name it. And Hotwire is a library that folks use, so you really want types to ship with your library. The PR seemed to kind of come out of nowhere, and then it got like just a ton of backlash from really, the TypeScript community in general. But yeah, it was like really, really spicy. And oddly enough, that came out around-ish the same time that Svelte did kind of a similar thing, but nowhere near the same thing, where Svelte did kind of take TypeScript out of their code base, but instead they are generating types with JSDoc. So at the end of the day, the user experience is exactly the same. Maybe even a little bit better, but the internal development experience is great because you don't have to send the code through any kind of a build pipeline. So yeah. I don't know. That was like TypeScript just blew up there for a second.
Yeah, I didn't know all the details with DHH.
Yeah.
The Svelte stuff has been interesting because people are like, oh no, SvelteKit doesn't support TypeScript. And that's not true.
It's not it.
It does. You can still add that lang equals TS attribute to the script tag. You can still do everything. As you point out, the user experience is still the same, or the dev experience is still the same. Just the code that they write as part of the framework has JSDoc instead of TypeScript.
Yeah.
And I heard that part of the reason is because it just becomes really difficult to track, like, where's that type problem coming from? And so that reduces friction on their end.
Yeah, well, and I was listening to Rich talk about some more reasons. He's like, when you're working on the framework and the framework itself breaks, and then you have to look at like a transpiled source map of an output, it breaks your brain. You can't go and fix that very easily. And especially if, let's say, a user runs into a problem with Svelte the library and they send you this like minified junk that you just can't make sense of, it's way harder to debug. So basically, Svelte becomes very transparent and open by using JavaScript files and untranspiled files as well. So now if something breaks or if you're developing a feature internally, you can really just like inspect source and put breakpoints inside of the Svelte library code in and of itself. And there's just way more visibility into it. It's not hidden behind layers of different translations and languages.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to reference Syntax. This is one of our favorites, but they did an episode in June called "Is JSDoc Better Than TypeScript?" But it does a great job, if you're not familiar with JSDocs, what the difference is. And in a lot of ways, you get the same features by using JSDocs as you would TypeScript. And you can use them together. So if you add JSDocs within your TypeScript file, it just gives you more information. Think like VS Code, IntelliSense information.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe we dive into that a little bit. Like TypeScript is doing the types, what type a specific variable is, what type an object is, and how you access its properties. But if you were to hover over like a function, you know how you get those really nice little descriptions and things that say like input and output and returns and talks about all the errors? That's JSDoc. So the thing that acts a little bit more like some human readable stuff when you hover over things, that's what JSDoc is providing. And yeah, I would say really good libraries do both.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and TypeScript in general is just funny to me. This might be a hot take.
Yeah.
People are just like, I don't like TypeScript, or they can be really opinionated about it. The 90% of what I use with TypeScript is not very difficult. Like, I'm just saying whether something's a string, whether it's a number, and a lot of times it catches errors for me before I compile it, and it's fantastic. I think, and maybe this is probably where Rich is coming from. The harder part is if you're trying to manage a framework and you're doing crazy stuff because you're not
Yeah.
sure what all the types are that people are going to pass in or trying to use.
The minute you're using like mapped types or key of
Yep.
or type of and generics,
Yep.
it
The generics
becomes
is the
more complicated to write.
yeah. Well, and I think some of it is just like the readability of it, because a lot of times when I see
Yeah.
generics, it's like these angle brackets with T, and I'm like, what's T? It just becomes sometimes hard to figure out what's going on.
Okay, here's an interesting question for you. When you use TypeScript, do you like explicitly define types everywhere possible, or are you the other end of the spectrum where you're like, I want to infer types everywhere possible?
I do a little bit of both, so I'm
Hmm.
not strict. Mostly, I let VS Code tell me what it needs. So if it says, I don't know what this is, I will tell it, and I just code by the error or
Okay, yeah.
the line.
Like for me, like for instance, when you're defining a function, I'm pretty particular about specifically defining the return type of the function,
Mhm,
like in the declaration, and
mhm,
not have it being inferred at the bottom of it. Mostly because, like, what if you screw up the thing that you're returning and you don't explicitly define
mhm.
what you want to come out of the function? Next thing you
Yeah,
know, you actually kind of have a problem.
yeah. That's
Let's
a great
say
point.
you're returning an object and you're forgetting one specific property, and if you're relying on inference, that's just going to get sent, you know?
Yep.
But if you say like this function should always return this type of object, it's going to catch that for you.
Well, and to your point, if TypeScript is supposed to help provide that documentation, and say you go to that function to see what it does, it's a longer function. You've
Yeah.
got to look at the top and then go down to
Yeah.
the bottom. You've also got to read code to figure out what it is. Whereas if you declare that in the top of the function, then it becomes a lot more readable, and you can get the information that you need without having to go digging for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I'll be curious to see where TypeScript ends up in the future. I mean, it's already been around for quite a long time. Um,
Mhm.
but with this proposal coming out to add some kind of optional type syntax into the language, I'd be really curious to see what happens to all these TypeScript projects. Like, I think that proposal, even if it's good, is going to have like a really hard time getting adopted if there's no clear migration path from existing TypeScript projects over to this native, JS type notation, whatever that is.
Mhm. Mark did bring up a great point. So a lot of times people don't like TypeScript because they feel like it adds a lot of clutter to their code and makes it harder to read. But the complex stuff you can define in a .d.ts file without cluttering up your actual code files. So if I
Good
find
point.
myself, yeah, if I find myself referencing a particular type, a lot of times, then I will define it in that global.d.ts file so that it gets used in multiple places. And again, that's just dry programming. Plus, it's going to reduce your errors.
Yeah, that's true. And even let's say you have a particularly nasty type, or like you're passing in a couple really big nasty objects into a function, and you don't want to put that stuff inline. And even if you extract those types and put them in the same file, it can just get really nasty. So yeah,
Yeah.
there comes the d.ts file to the rescue, where you like just pull that out and be like, this is where I talk about types for this thing. It's
Hmm.
over here in its own
Yeah.
area.
And that's where I found myself getting to more of the like nitty gritty niche types of TypeScript, even though it's not that niche or that difficult. But what you can do is if you have a giant object that you've defined in, say, your global.d.ts file, and you want to reference it in multiple places, you can use things like partial to say, I'm only going to grab a piece of this object, or you can use omit. So, hey, I'm doing everything in here except omit these properties. Or I was trying to think, there's another one that's really helpful. You can extend. So you can say, say I have an address that I want to define separately, and then I have a user, and then I can associate the two by extending the address definition.
And those are like so important. because while type systems are great, if you don't kind of reuse and extend and, modify your existing types and you're just redefining every time, you could end up in a broken state where you change one type and you really expected it to change through your whole system, but you redefine string instead of using a particular property on an existing type. So I've been leveraging those like a whole lot more nowadays, where I try to have one source of truth. Oh, here's a good example. Like, normally you're going to get back some big gnarly response from an API, and I tend to like fully type those out. But then you usually use like some kind of limited set of that within your application. I basically just like pluck bits out of the API response to create a new type using things like whatever, partial, omit, extends, however you want to do it. And that way, if for some reason the API interface ever changes, you can make kind of one change at that layer, and it's inherited through the rest of your application types.
Yeah. I did want to highlight this. I trust Eric, but I do need to do research on what he's saying, because I had not heard this. But he was saying the .d.ts file is actually a code smell now, which means that it's not necessarily considered the best practice. And the .d.tsz file is intended for the transpiler to output the types, and that you should define them as a standard .ts file and import the type in the file.
I would, that's the pattern that I've always used. Just use raw.ts files and define your types in there, and let the compiler figure out what to stick in the d.ts files. I know some folks did it the other way around, but I'm glad that there's an answer there, because I always felt that was a gray area. But yeah, you author TS and you should produce d.ts files.
That's
unless, I feel like there's a caveat. Like, think about what the @types packages are. It's just a d.ts file that defines an interface. So I feel like that's one area where d.ts files still work. If you're bringing in a library that's untyped and you have to write the types for yourself, stick that in a d.ts file. So Goose, maybe you can kind of confirm or deny that claim, but that's the way I've always viewed it, where they are. That's where those d.ts files truly are useful.
He said that .tsz is an extension.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Okay. So actually, we were both laughing, so I want to make sure that comes through for the audio version of the podcast. The .d.tsz file is a typo. It's just .d.ts. So if people are like, oh, goodness, never even heard of that .tsz, that would be a typo.
Okay, good. And confirmed. Yeah.
Yes.
D.ts is still useful for defining types at package boundaries, for untyped package boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is another thing with the .d.ts file, because that's included as a global. You don't have to import those types into, say, a component. Your project automatically recognizes that. And a lot of times within your TS config file, you would say, hey, here's where my globals are. In this case, if you're using a .ts file, you would have to import those into your component.
Okay. Speaking of TypeScript, we'll keep moving on this train. I started watching the TypeScript documentary last night, and that's the nerdiest thing I've ever said in my life.
Did your wife watch it with you?
No. But I was like legit, like, had a bowl of popcorn, sat on the couch, turned on the TypeScript documentary. It's pretty cool. Like, it came from Microsoft. So the biggest challenge that they said was like, Microsoft basically said, hey, all these great desktop applications, we need to start writing them in JavaScript because they need to work in the browser. And everybody's like, but JavaScript doesn't scale. And so they came up with like so many different ways to like write C# and turn it into JavaScript, or do all these crazy things so that they could work with more mature languages and turn it into JavaScript. And then they brought in some folks who were like, hey, you need to actually solve this problem, like somehow figure out how to make JavaScript, the language, more workable for large teams and large projects. And so that's how TypeScript came to be. And
interesting.
They said making it open source was actually like a big uphill battle politics wise in the company, because Microsoft is a very licensed software business model.
Interesting. But, I think that's probably contributed to the adoption, is that 100%. It is open source.
100%. They said They said the driver was web developers will never trust us if we don't make it open source.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, this is pretty good.
But it's been one of those things where, I feel like Microsoft had lost a lot of its authority in that space. Like people kind of like, oh, Microsoft. But they've I feel like come out of not out of nowhere. But when you think about the developer ecosystem, it's like VS
Yeah.
Code, GitHub, all
Yeah.
these things that I use every day. That's all Microsoft.
Yeah. And that pivot was in the last, 2 years, 3 years,
Ish.
maybe? I mean, yeah, all of a sudden they have their hands in everything we do. And I'm not scared about it. They've only been making good changes thus far.
Right.
I mean, think about, what was it, like unlimited private repositories on GitHub now, right? Like,
Yeah.
they've been making great changes and I've got no complaints.
Sorry, brief pause. I'm gonna have to switch my headphones. James would love this.
Batteries out.
It's because I was on an airplane all day yesterday.
Ah.
We need music.
Yeah, I got to get all those integrations set up with my Stream
Okay, let's
Deck.
see if that. Oh,
I hear you.
I hear you.
You're good.
Let me check my audio settings.
Check.
Right now, you can say whatever you want about me.
All right.
Oh, this is gonna be fun.
Oh, my coworkers are trying to join. Got to send them to James's YouTube channel then.
There we go. I'm back.
Awesome. Can you hear me?
Oh, I thought I was back.
Check.
No. Oh, hold on. This is embarrassing.
Oh, you're gonna hear from James in
Nope.
the next one, I'm sure.
Okay, I'm gonna leave and come right back.
All right. So our other host, James Quick, always gives Amy a really hard time. He says you should use wired headphones, right? So they don't run out of battery and you have less latency. And every time she shows up with like her AirPods, James gives her a hard time. So she'll never hear the end of this one.
Okay.
There we go.
Sorry about that. So I don't know what you're talking about. Hopefully I'm not coming out of left field. But we had Zach Lloyd on, which the live episode's available on YouTube, and the audio version hasn't been released yet. And actually, I think we're going to release these out of order since we're talking about hot drama topics. So stay tuned. But Zach Lloyd is the creator of Warp. And he was one of the features that really blew me away about Warp is you can pass in all these different props and like parameter things, and it helps you document how you interact with the CLI. And so I feel like in some ways TypeScript kind of relates to that because you're talking about types, you're talking about what you want to pass in. Warp helps you do a lot of that stuff as well. And Brad, I think if I remember correctly, you were on Warp and then kind of step back to move into the terminal that VS Code provides. And then you're like, oh goodness, I'm moving back to Warp. So did you move back to Warp?
I did, yeah. And I'm really trying to use it daily. And I also like gave some presentations to our team and created some like team specific workflows that I think that helped us out running some more complex commands that we have for our like internal platform.
So you noticed the difference, or like you're all in now?
Yeah, I'm pretty all in. It still just frustrates me that I have to go to a separate window sometimes. Because like, okay, it works great when you've got your IDE on one monitor and your browser on another. But then when you need to go to the terminal, I guess I need another monitor is what I'm saying, right? Like so. 3 monitors, 3 windows, like yeah, that's when it gets sticky. And that's why I liked having the terminal embedded into VS Code. But it sounds like Warp is just not going to be able to make that jump ever or anytime soon, at least.
We'll see. I don't know. You have other things like Figma that have figured out how to do embeds with their developer tools. So
Oh, really? In VS Code?
Yeah. So
Wow.
I'm trying to remember the name of their conference. I think it was called Config, because that would make sense.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Figma or Config. So at Config, one of the things that they announced was they have an extension for VS Code, and you can install it. It gives you a little icon in your side drawer like you have with your File Explorer, Git, whatever. So there's a little Figma icon. You click on that, and it basically opens Figma in DevTool mode inside of VS Code. So if you're trying to do like figure out how many pixels something is away from everything, you can have Figma open in a panel within VS Code and then still be coding in another pane or another, however you want to.
Well, that makes sense because Figma is built on web technologies. So is VS Code. They're probably just doing some kind of iframe canvas magic. Whereas like wasn't warp written in Rust. And so like,
that's a great point.
You know, square peg, round hole, like I don't know how that's going to work out.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
So one thing, since we were talking about the Figma setup, one thing that is really cool though, is you can export assets directly from that panel, that pane, into your project. And it's smart enough to make guesses about where you want your images to go, which is pretty cool.
That's cool.
But I still, when you're talking about window management, a lot of times I still go back to Figma, just so I keep code spaces and design in a design space.
I still, there's like a little part of me that's nagging. It's like, Brad, go to one monitor. Just focus on one thing. You don't need Twitter up on the second window at all times. Like, you know, I think it would be really good for productivity and focus. But I will say, any time I record something or I live stream or anything, having that second monitor as a monitor, you know, to run OBS out of is like essential.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. So I worked most of this week from a hotel room, and I sat down at my setup this morning. I was just like, I can breathe.
Right.
So that's funny. I do have one monitor though. I will say that it's just a very, very large monitor.
What do you have? Like a 49-inch?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's big.
49-inch ultra wide. So I bought it right as COVID hit, and we had moved. And they were out of like the 43-inch or something. So I was like, oh, what's 6 more inches? And I was like, I'm going to hate it. Like we had to put the back seat in my car down in order to get it home. And I was like, oh goodness, this is huge. I can't do it. I can't do it. And then I set it up and I was like, I love it.
So
wonderful.
Like, okay, do you ever have problems when you're sharing your screen, or does it have the ability to like divide it very specifically in the middle and only share one part?
So as far as I know, the monitor doesn't have any application or anything that does that. But like Zoom, I'm just going to share a window. Or if I'm in Tuple, you can control the share space with that. But then a lot of the people that I'm working with are also on large monitors. So I'll be like, oh, is this size work for you? And they're like, it is a little big, but it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, the other reason why I like a physical divide of 2 monitors is just because I'm like, this one is getting streamed. Don't put anything on this one that you don't want people to see. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's something about it. And you mess up one setting, next thing you know, your bank stuff is on the screen.
Yes. Well, when I was doing my workshop this week, I was mirroring my screen, and there was a few moments where I was like, second monitor would be nice that I could just, have stuff off screen.
Okay, let's talk about like the conference, your workshop, and then I kind of want to talk about
let's talk about
CFPs and how my situation went, and talk about advice there. So
Yep. So the workshop that I was at GraphQL Conf in San Francisco, and I'm going to be transparent. This is the first workshop that I'd ever led, which was kind of an interesting experience. So I've spoken from the stage, I've live streamed. I don't even know if you know this, Brad, but I was an instructor at the University of Florida. So I was one of their professors. Yeah. So, I mean, I've taught in tons of settings, but I've never done a workshop at a conference. And it was a little bit different prepping, not knowing exactly who was in the room. There were some people that were like, Jan, I already know this stuff. And other people that were, oh goodness, that's a lot of information. Can you slow down? I don't understand. So I think probably the next time I do a workshop similar to that, I'll do a little bit more research and work with the conference organizer to really figure out, okay, who is my target audience in the room?
Yeah.
What do they know? And what are they interested in? So being GraphQL conf, you can assume they like GraphQL, which is what Redwood uses. And that was a huge part of the workshop. And so we did some stuff with GraphQL, but only 2 people in the room had ever worked with Redwood before. And then a large majority had worked with Prisma, which is another piece of technology that Redwood uses. So, but even then, like when we were starting to get into the workshop content, I did get the question, excuse me, what is Prisma and what are you doing? So, that's kind of hard to figure out, like, what is the balance there in trying to not bore other people, but also not lose the other end.
Yeah. I feel like, okay, you're like, no shade on Redwood, right? Redwood,
That's fine.
I think Redwood is a great collection of industry standard tools, right? You've got your Prisma, you've got your React, you've got your GraphQL. But it's one of those things where if you're trying to teach it, folks kind of need to know all of those individual aspects first before jumping in. Kind of like the way Gatsby tied itself to GraphQL in a sense, where it was like, oh man, I gotta learn GraphQL if I want to generate this static site with Gatsby.
Yeah.
Redwood and so like once you're up on all that, it's like, wow, Redwood is the thing I've been looking for, the thing that ties them all together that I really had wanted. But if you're just learning, it's one of those things where it's probably pretty deep water to get into early.
Yeah, that is a great point. So I was on the Meta Frameworks panel. I'll try and find a link and share that in the show notes a couple months ago. And one of the moderators after the fact was like, oh, I need to check out Redwood again. And he's like, oh my goodness, where's this been all my life? This is everything that I would have pulled in. So it's like people that know all those things. You're right. That's the exact response of, oh, this is awesome. I don't have to do all this setup yourself. But I can see for a newcomer, it's like, oh goodness, where do I go? And I even remember when I first started trying to get into the JavaScript ecosystem, I had a tab open for Jest, a tab open for GraphQL, a tab open for Apollo, and tab open for JavaScript and for TypeScript. And when I ran into an error, I would literally run that error in every single set of documentation because I didn't know like what's causing the problem. Where does one technology end and the other one begin? And that's one of the things that's cool about the JavaScript ecosystem, that composability that everybody talks about. You can pull in all these pieces. But for newbies, it's also hard to know, okay, I'm not sure where the boundaries are on each of these.
Yeah, like we're kind of blessed to be on the other side of that hump now. I remember how hard it was trying to separate like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript from any one of the libraries that we were trying to use at the time.
Yep. Now, I do want to follow back up on that comment that you made. So I think Redwood is shifting slightly with this next epoch. And because you're like, I have to know all these technologies. And so one of the things that we're doing with React server components is allowing somebody to have more of that transparent API layer. So they're not necessarily tied to GraphQL because there is a lot of friction there.
Because this server component is just going to be put your server logic right here, do whatever you want. Yeah. But I'm sure there's probably like, hey, if you want to scaffold this with GraphQL.
Yes, that's exactly
whatever,
right.
It's in there.
That's right. Okay. So right now with Redwood, when you install a fresh project, you have an API folder and you have a web folder. Yeah. And it's very clear that I'm working in the front end right now and I'm working in the API. I'm working in the back end right now. So things are going to get really interesting in the future because now you're starting to put back end server code in that web folder, which I know you have opinions about. I'm just like loving.
Okay. Like, okay. I guess I kind of want to ask you this first.
Okay.
React server components, have you used them from like a baseline level? Like, have you tried to use them without a framework?
No, I have not. I've only used them within Next.
Okay. Yeah, I have not either. And I'd be really curious, like, what that flow is like. But I feel like this is like an implementation detail under the hood that me and you should not be saying the words React server components to one another. Me and you as app developers should be thinking, where do I stick my server code? Where do I stick my client code? And when do they run?
That's interesting. So
that's it. Like this is a under the hood technology that's going to make things better, faster. Like ES build. You know,
so you're not, you haven't dug into SvelteKit, right?
I have
like
not.
Hardcore.
No.
Okay. So
I built James's course on it, so
No pit.
But hardcore? No, I wouldn't say hardcore.
So what's interesting about SvelteKit is that you have a plus layout.ts file. You can also specify a plus layout.server.ts file. And what
does that even mean? Like, that's where my mind breaks.
So the plus layout.ts file, SvelteKit will decide, should this run on the client or should this run on the server? Sometimes I'll run on the server. Sometimes I'll run on the client. I'll just run it wherever I need it if I can. Whereas the plus layout.server.ts file, you're explicitly deciding you are going to run this code on the server for me. And
like, what are you putting in a layout file that needs to be server specific? I'm kind of at a loss.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Right? Like,
so I got a great example for you.
Okay.
If you're working with auth, hey, I want for my layout and my header, I have a login button. If I'm logged in, I want you to show me the log out button. If I'm not logged in, show me the sign up button.
Okay.
So that file, I do want it to be in the layout file, so I'm not having to duplicate it across multiple pages. And sometimes you want that code to run on the server, but sometimes you just say, maybe if you have something in your session or your cookie, you can just grab it locally. So that would be maybe on the client side.
We're getting some really good comments right now from
go ahead and highlight
chat. I want to highlight Jay Larkey's comment right here. Oh, by the way, what's up? What's up, Jay? I've seen you around the Twitter sphere. He's
on the podcast. So go check out James's YouTube.
That's great. All right.
Yeah, we had him on, but we haven't released the audio version yet. So
yeah, okay. There's no such thing as RSC without framework. Okay, I didn't realize that. Like, and this makes sense then. Then we should not be talking about this as app developers. We should be talking about this as framework developers. But that's not where I put myself at. But yeah, like, it's going to be one of those things where, like, once it's all in there, we won't ever think about it again. That's just part of the landscape of a React application that's built into it.
Yeah. So I can talk a little bit about how I've used React Server Components in Next, and then a little bit about how we're implementing it with Redwood.
Yeah.
So with Next, you do have to say at the top of a file, like, use client if it's a client component. And right now with Redwood, you do say at the top of and I can include some links to our experimental stuff, but you do say at the top of the file, use server or use client to specify where you want that code to run. So when do you run which? Well, if it involves state, so think like a navigation by toggling it on or off, like if it's a slide in panel or something like that needs to be toggled, that's going to have to run on the client. Your server can't keep track of that particular state for you. So a lot of times when you're trying to pull data from the server, maybe you want that to be a server component, because then you're delivering more HTML and CSS to the browser. You get that nice, juicy SEO, metadata, OG tags, all the things that crawlers and Google love.
So like, server components are going to be fully rendered HTML sent over the wire, right?
That's right. Okay. Yep. And where it gets a little confusing and kind of the edge of my knowledge, sorry about the dog, if you can hear it, where it starts to get a little hairy is streaming. So say something changes, you don't want to refresh the entire page, but you do want the server to push fresh information over to the client. So within Redwood right now, we have a mutate function that you can run, or because it's server, you can use async. Sorry, can you still hear that? That's going to be bad. I'm recording.
No, I was going to say not anymore, but he stopped and then he started again.
Okay. But you can use async, or within Redwood, we've also created a mutate function to say, hey, push this back and forth as the value changes.
Right. So basically, like, Remix does the same thing, but without the streaming. Like Remix and Next know how to revalidate stale information if you do some kind, or like most frameworks now have an action function, and the action knows that when I'm done running, I probably have to rerun the loaders so that we get fresh information. But you're saying React Server Components do this kind of on the fly without like a page reload. It calls the mutate and then it sends back fresh information just like that.
That's right. And that's the Redwood implementation. So if you use Next right now, it'll look a little bit different.
Okay.
But, and actually, this is kind of like an editor note, but maybe after the podcast is done recording, I can show some of the experimental stuff we've been working on if you want to live stream. Yeah, so that's in Redwood right now. Now, with Remix, it's kind of interesting. They're not using React server components. They're using what's called a data loader pattern, which means that there is a loader function that you get by default with Remix. You make a call to the server. You say, this is all the information that I need. And then you, in your component, you use a hook that Remix provides to grab all that data that came from your loader function. So I know that we've both played around with Remix. You're a huge fan. You're all in.
I'm all in.
You're all in. I think one of the things that I like the most about Remix is that, like, you're talking about forms, you're working with an HTML form. You don't have to worry about all this weird state. Where does this data go?
I think I have 2 complaints about Remix. Okay. After like really running it through the gamut, I've got 2 complaints. Number 1 is form data. Form data is a little bit difficult to work with because it gets serialized over the network and you have to deal with that on the other end. So like you pretty much have to use something like Zod or runtime type checking to make sure that what came through is actually what you're expecting. And just dealing with form data in general, like I don't love the form data API, you know, .get all. It's kind of wonky a little bit sometimes. But you just have to use the web standards on both like the request and the response objects. You know, that's what you got to live and die by. Second thing that rubs me the wrong way that they got to get there is, you know, look, we are living in an ESM world now. We should all be writing ESM. It's supported everywhere. I think we can finally start killing off CJS. And React's server bundle isn't like ESM first. It does all this weird stuff, and you have to like specifically tell it what server dependencies to bundle, and it never works right. And like half the time I just can't use ESM only packages in there. And so like if they figure that out, I'll pretty much just like stop having anything negative to say about Remix. Form data, you know, maybe we can find some libraries to help with that or something, or just once you establish patterns, it's a little bit better. But yeah, those are the 2 things that rub me the wrong way right now.
So this has been interesting. I just built 2 projects, pretty deep projects, I would say, on Redwood, and then another one on Remix.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting being like, oh man, yes, Redwood gets this right. And oh man, like Remix gets this right. And so I'll probably give the one that is probably my biggest criticism maybe of Remix. I don't want to be like all negative things, because both are really great frameworks for what they do. And I can also talk about why I made certain decisions with each app. So Redwood, for example, it has the spa thing figured out. Like it's a beautiful experience. But in terms of server-side rendering and passing those SEO tags and the metadata and all that stuff, it's still, we're working on it and it's going to be awesome, but it's not quite there yet. And so I mentioned this the other week, I created a badge app. So if you are interested, you can go to this link. I'll ticket.redwoodjs.com/Amy, and you can register for a free virtual ticket to the Redwood JS conference that we're doing next week. Or you can get 35% off if you can swing it to Southern Oregon last minute, no big deal. But this app is running on Redwood. So it's one of those things, if I'm going to promote Redwood with this app, we should build it in Redwood. Sure. That only makes sense. So it was fun building that app, but where we ran into trouble was that server-side piece. We need great metadata to be able to pass over. We need it to be snappy. Yeah. We need Google to be able to figure out everything. So we are running experimental code, but I did have to tap on the shoulders of other developers to say, hey, will you plug in what you've been working on into my project? And so that, I think, was kind of a learning experience trying to get that up to speed. And like I said, it's going to be awesome once we've worked out all the kinks and the developer experience of that. But that was like one of those rough edges. So with that in mind, the new compressed website I've been rebuilding in Remix because I want all those things. I want the server-side piece of it. I want the OG tags. I want Google to love it. So it makes sense that that is on another framework, say like Remix. Well, what gets hairy, in my opinion, with Remix is the way that they handle their router. So everything it's a folder-based routing system, but unlike Next, I was trying to think if Next does this right now. Right now, Next does use, I think with Next 13, they do have nested folders, but with Remix, it's a single like
flat.
Thank you. I was trying to think, what is that word? A flat folder system.
Yep.
So for example, if I wanted admin/users, my folder structure would be admin.users.
Yep.
And so when you start getting into a project that has tons of pages and different layouts and things like that, that folder starts to get a little unwieldy. I just have trouble finding exactly what I'm looking for, especially because if you want to define your layouts, you're also using other things in those folder names to say, hey, use this particular layout because they have a nested layout system built in their folder structure.
Are you using the flat files or flat folders? Because a route, instead of being just a file, it can be a folder that can have some related things in there. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I'm using the folder, but that was another thing. So I have a folder, say for my admin stuff, and I have layouts and things like that. But then say if I get down to help, I don't need a folder for each individual help page. So then I just have files. But then it gets confusing because in VS Code, all your folders appear at the top and all your files appear at the bottom. So then I'm going to two different places to say manage the help layout, and then going to the bottom of the file to find my files or my pages for that particular section.
Okay.
So it just gets a little clunky with the user experience trying to manage all of that.
Gotcha. Okay. I actually really like the flat file structure.
I did at first, but then when you start working with a project where you have like 20 or 30 different folders there and trying to manage all that, it starts to get a little clunky. Especially when those folder names get really long, then you've got to expand your sidebar in VS Code to be able to see everything. So the other thing that's kind of interesting, and I'd be interested to hear your perspective on this, is that you can put the components related to that particular page in that folder. At first I'm like, this is beautiful. Everything that I need is in this folder, so I'm not having to go to a layouts folder. I'm not having to go to a components folder. Everything is right here when I'm working on this page. So that would be a difference from Redwood. Redwood has a different folder for each of those things. The problem is sometimes it gets confusing where I'm like, oh, this should live definitely in this folder, in this layout. And then I'm working on another page and I'm like, oh, that component is really nice. I think I'd like to pull in that component. Yeah. So then it's like, do I reference it in this layout folder? Do I move this component out? Like what? I've got to update all my imports. Get fuzzy.
The pattern that we use at work is that in those folders, only a couple things belong there. One is the route itself. The other one is the route test, the loader test, and the action test. Now, why do we have 3 different test files for just the route? It's because the loader and the action test run in a node environment, and the route test you want to run when you're testing like the render function of the route, you want that to run in a browser environment. So we split out those 3 to where we could tell VTest, hey, your loader and action are running in a node environment. And then we have a components folder. All the components go in there. No questions. You don't have to try to, worry about all that.
Do you have any subdirectories in your components folder to say, hey, this is the section of the site, or this is the page of the site?
Nope.
This component. Oh, that's flat too. Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. It's a component. Like, I think when you try to organize like that, you're just going to continually be reorganizing because it's just like a structure, like an arbitrary structure that you put on there. They're all React components. They all can be used anywhere. The structure that you're imposing is arbitrary, and somebody else could come by and refactor it and just be like, it doesn't really belong there. I don't like that name. Like, it is what it is. That's my take.
That's interesting. So let me give an example. The badge app that I created, there's a components folder there, and I did create a subfolder in there called admin that has all the admin components. And part of the reason was because I was like, well, I have a speaker component and I also have a speaker component on the front end. So it's like trying to, even if the names are different, like mentally, which component am I talking about? And it just, to me, it was starting to get a little confusing.
Yeah, I hear you there. Yeah. Okay, well, let's see. Okay, so like you taught the workshop, you thought it went pretty good. I mean, the material sounded great. He said the audience was a little bit tough to nail down. I recently have been trying to be a speaker at conferences. And so I went through the CFP process for that conference, and the outcome didn't go the way that I wanted it to. So submitted 3 topics, nothing got selected. And I'm curious, what are your tips and tricks for like getting a CFP accepted?
So this is kind of interesting. I don't think that I've ever submitted a CFP. I'm going to be a total like edge case here. I have never submitted a CFP like blindly, like as part of the bigger pool and had it accepted. All of the conferences that I've spoken at, I've reached out to the organizer and asked them directly about being at the conference, or they've reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you do this?" Or like in the case of Compressed, we've recorded episodes live, in which case James has handled that. So he's either pitched it as a session or they've asked us as Compressed to come on and do a session.
Now, when you were like reaching out to organizers directly, like what kind of credentials did you have to be so bold, to be like, hey, like, can I come speak at your conference? Can I circumvent the CFP process?
Yeah. So it helped. This is like one of those things where like juniors, where it's like you're reading a job description and it says like experience needed. And it's like, how am I going to get experience if I don't have experience? So it's kind of the same way in this case, because what I was able to do is I was able to go to an organizer and say, hey, here's other talks that I've given, and be able to send links to other talks that I've said. Like this is
just butter them up beforehand.
This is the experience that you can expect.
Yeah.
But so if you don't have that, I would say the other thing that I've done, and this would be the example with Scott Tolinsky.
Yeah.
So I have a course on Level Up Tutorials.
Yeah.
I reached out to him and said, hey, can I create a course on Level Up Tutorials? Here's my YouTube channel. Because at that point, I hadn't done any conference speaking. Here's my YouTube channel. This is what you can expect in terms of production quality and content. And so at that point, he's like, yeah, this is great. And that's my YouTube channel, even though I haven't posted in a while, has been a great source in terms of people kind of getting to know my teaching style, production quality, as I mentioned, but it's also helped me organize those things, because when you're prepping for a talk, a lot of times it can be overwhelming. Like looking at a workshop that I was supposed to give for an hour and a half is like, oh goodness, I've never spoken from the platform for an hour and a half straight. This sounds miserable. How do I plan this out? But as I started to chunk things out, it's like, okay, if I think of this in 15-minute segments, well, sure, I could create 6 15-minute YouTube videos. That's no problem. I have 40 examples of those on my, not quite, but 40 examples of that on my YouTube channel. So then when you start thinking about it in smaller chunks, it becomes a lot more manageable when you're creating content, but also, as I was mentioning, when you're trying to reach out to organizers.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Like I've got plenty of content to back me up. I've got podcasts, YouTube videos, all this stuff. But I guess it's like making sure that the organizer knows about it, not just being a part of the general pool that, is hard to stick out from.
Right. Well, one of the things I mentioned with that workshop that I struggled with was knowing exactly where everybody was in the room. And that's one of the things about like working directly with the organizer. So I would say, even if you're going through the general call for proposals, it's important to talk to the organizer, because they're going to know the audience that they're targeting towards better than anybody else. And they want their event to be the best as it is, or the best possible event that it can be. So they're naturally going to want to help you. So it's important, I think, to have that relationship with them.
Yeah, those are good tips.
Cool. So I would say don't be disheartened. I've gotten rejected too.
It was my first time, and honestly, life is so busy. That was kind of like a nice, happy little accident, I guess.
Yeah. Where do you want to go?
You want to do picks and plugs, or you want to talk about Bun for a second?
I was just going to say, I want to pause on Bun.
Bun.
And then you mentioned Raycast. So I do at least want to give them a shout out, but I know we're getting close on time.
Bun.
So yeah, you mentioned Bun. I don't quite know all the drama with Bun. That's why I wanted to pause on it. I know it's been like all the hype, but I wanted you to kind of, if you can, educate me.
It's no drama. It's all good. It's all good. Bun released their 1.0 version, and what it kind of aims to do is like simplify the entire tool chain. You don't need a test runner and a TypeScript compiler and all this stuff. Bun just does it for you, and it's super fast.
What does that mean? Like, it does it for you?
It understands TypeScript out of the box.
Does it write tests for you? Like
no.
Okay. Like
but like all like the fragmentation in the JavaScript ecosystem, Bun is trying to make kind of one tool to rule them all. And if you remember Rome kind of tried to do that too. It started as like a linter and a formatter and this and that. It was a project out of Facebook that eventually kind of died off. Bun is one of those ones where it's like, we're really fast and we kind of do all the things you expect us to do. You know how Node is starting to get those really nice features like environment variables and like they have NodeMon built in and a test runner built in. Bun is kind of like starting with those things. And I guess I wanted to bring it up because while it is solving our pain points, it's addressing the problems that we have today where like we just want a better runtime. Look at Dino. Dino tried to do this, right? Where it like did TypeScript out of the box and it was faster and stuff like that. But Dino didn't land as like the solution because when you're a new runtime, everybody has to support you in order to become like the de facto standard. And Node is still the de facto standard because it runs on every hosting platform, so if Bun is going to be successful, they need to really get some really good partnerships, mostly to like stay relevant. Otherwise, they're just going to fall off. It'll be like, man, do you remember Bun? That was like so nice. I wish that would have got adopted. Well, but does Vercel support it? Does Heroku support it? Does DigitalOcean support it? Like everywhere it needs a Bun runtime.
It's like the gatekeepers.
We'll see.
Think about.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where it's like you kind of need a fresh start to make things better. But like tools like ESBuild did it. They became the new de facto standard because everybody saw the benefits.
That's interesting. So, dang it, I have a great pick and plug. I'll hold that. Okay, so I know we're getting close on time. Let's talk about Raycast really quick. I have made the switch from Alfred over to Raycast. I'm all in.
I've never used Alfred, but I've been like comparing Spotlight with Raycast, and Raycast obviously just does so much more. But there's one thing that I don't like about Raycast.
What is it?
Like I just open up Spotlight and type in YouTube or like any website, and it like somehow knows my history or knows how to get there. Whereas if I open Raycast and type YouTube, it does nothing.
Oh, can you not create like a snippet, or not a snippet, but an extension?
I probably could, but it's like Spotlight did it out of the box where like if you type YouTube or I was going to say Instagram. Yeah, Instagram, like it kind of shows up. But Raycast just doesn't do that.
Huh. It's like I know can you search your history within Spotlight? It's been years since I've used Spotlight.
So I can search Google for a website, but I can't just like navigate to that website.
Okay. So like with Raycast, you could probably create just an extension that would hot link, but you'd probably need an extension to see if somebody else built something to check your YouTube history.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like I haven't gone very far down the Raycast extension rabbit hole, but like I'm sure there are things that get everything done. Like clipboard history all of a sudden has become like my most favorite tool ever. That along with window management hotkeys, loving it.
Yeah. I think my only criticism in terms of tools that it's consolidated is I also use it for a snippet manager, and it's just a touch slower, which James actually warned me about. It's just a touch slower than some of the other alternatives that are out there.
Is it built in?
Yeah.
Import snippets, search snippets, create snippet. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I was using Text Expander before, and it got a little well, I just didn't want to pay for it as part of it. So this is going to be just a touch disjointed. So my apologies for not providing a nice, beautiful stream of thought here. But there were been a few comments in the chat related to the CFP process that we were just talking about that I wanted to highlight because I think that they're quality. But one was me. I made a comment. But sometimes your CFP just doesn't get accepted because it's how the review process is structured. I didn't comment this one. This is Goose. Sorry. I said something similar. But he was saying that he's part of the RubyConf planning committee and has been behind the scenes picking talks. So when you do that for him, he was saying that you compare 3 talks against each other. So even though yours is great, depending on who it was pitted against somebody, it might not have gotten chosen.
Yeah.
The other thing is you don't know how many people have submitted talks similar to yours. So if you're trying to provide more of a balanced conference experience, maybe they know I already have 5 talks on React Server components. We really want to talk about something else. You submitted a React Server component talk. It might be a great talk, but they've already locked in that particular content. So, cool. I think that was it.
Yeah, and with 500 submissions, I mean, man, they had their work cut out for them. Yeah. It was crazy. Well, but yeah, I like the next time around, I want to make sure that however I approach it, I come with like a lot more ammo and just to be like, hey, you should really have me as a speaker, even if I'm one of 10 talks about the same thing. Like I'm good for these reasons.
Yeah. So what's interesting about that conference, that's what's called. Oh, and hey, I'm wearing my shirt today.
Nice.
Clark created his own custom experience and they don't use Sessionize. So if you submit a lot of CFPs for conferences, a lot of companies or events will use Sessionize, which allows you to upload your profile, upload your talk title and description, and then you can submit that abstract to multiple events. And in Austin in January, I was talking to Clark. He has some crazy review process where like part of it's blind. Part of it, you do want personalities. So you can say, hey, this is who's coming to my event. I want to be able to promote it. So it's just a weird balance of trying to get all the things.
Yeah. I should have totally like just linked off to YouTube and podcasts and stuff, which is like I didn't do, which is a huge oversight at this point. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I think we've got everything. We can go into the final section of the episode where we do picks and plugs. So picks is usually something that we pick that we like, and plug is something that actually they're both kind of the same. One is personal and one's self-promotion generally. So do you have any picks and plugs for us?
Okay, I'm like so behind the ball on Apple products, because I just switched over like at the beginning of this year. But I just got the what's it called? The MagSafe battery pack. And I feel like it is awesome. We got it for the trip we're gonna take to Disney, and I figured like that would be really good for just having some extra juice over the day. And like it's light, it's easy. You just pop it on there. It was a little expensive, but like, it's exactly as advertised. I feel like it's gonna work just great.
I have not migrated into the new world of MagSafe. I'm still holding on to my iPhone 11. So I'll get there.
Isn't MagSafe like now the old world? They switched to USB-C, and I heard they were going to go to Qi charging or something.
Oh, I thought you were talking about like the magnet on the back, like being able to stick something on. Yeah, you can't stick anything on the back of an iPhone 11.
Like, but I thought I heard like with the new iPhone 15s and in the future they're going to change to like Qi chargers, and so like the MagSafe chargers aren't going to work or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Thanks, Europe.
We'll see. Hey, that's good though. Like everything will be USB-C. I got so mad when I had to buy a bunch of lightning cables.
Yeah, that's true.
That was dumb. I was living the dream, man. I had everything on one cable. It was so cool. And I had to get an iPhone.
And then it went downhill from there.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Okay, so what about a plug?
Plug? Yo, I just passed 1,000 followers on Twitter, which is like big for me. So twitter.com/BradGarrepy. I've been trying to post like cool pictures and little short like minute or 2-minute videos where I kind of like just try to make a point really quickly. I have one coming out about technical debt versus technical wealth, and that's a new term to me. And it's a really interesting take. So follow my Twitter to hear more about it.
Do you pay for your Twitter account? Do you have a blue check?
I don't know.
Did you see where Elon's like, everybody's going to pay now? It's
no
longer going to be a free service.
Yeah, I'm out then if that's the case. See ya.
So follow Brad at twitter.com.
I don't know. Then maybe Threads isn't half bad after all, but I abandoned it after a while. So
yeah, we'll see. I think the thing that makes me the most mad about the whole situation is I'm like, he dispersed my people.
Yeah.
So, look at that. Eric in the chat.
Yeah.
Goose has a blue sky invite. So jump on that mess.
All right. What about you, Amy? Pick some plugs.
Okay. So I'm going to pick a book and take it with a grain of salt. I haven't finished the book. So if it takes a turn and you hate it, just know I've forewarned you. And there's been some things that this particular author says that I don't quite agree with. But I'm also like, as I'm getting older, trying to be one of those people that I'm like, I don't need to read books from somebody that believes everything or says everything that I agree with. Like that's how you strengthen either what you believe, what you think about stuff, or, just opens you up to different ideas and viewpoints. So Stephen Bartlett has a podcast called The Diary of a CEO. He also has a YouTube channel called The Diary of a CEO, and I'll include links to these within the chat and within the show notes. So, but he I think released a book called The Diary of a CEO. So it has the same name. And Ali Abdal reviewed it on his YouTube channel. So I'll include a link to that as well. But I've started reading the book. And so far, like I'm really enjoying it. He does a great job of telling stories. Actually, there's several YouTube videos with him. It looks like they both interviewed each other for different things. But he's only like 30 and is a billionaire and has done all these different things with companies. And the book is 33 laws. What is it? 33 laws for something. What does it say? Give me a second. 33 laws of business and life. So it's been kind of interesting out of all the people that he's interviewed and all of his life experiences, these are the things that he sees are consistent. So I've really enjoyed, like I said, I've really enjoyed reading. It's an easy read.
That's pretty cool. And you said he's only 30?
Yeah.
Wow.
What
perspective does this guy have? I'm older than him.
Yeah. Well, some of the things that he said, trying to think. Well, I won't go off on that. Another time. Stay tuned. Let's see. I was going to include an Amazon link. And then for my plug, I'm going to plug let me get this link really quick. I'm going to plug the Redwood JS conference. So I already shared this link earlier, but you can go to ticket.redwoodjs.com/Amy and you can get 35% off the in-person event, or you can get a free virtual ticket. So would love for you to join. And that project's open source if you want to check out the code on GitHub. So it was fun to put together you can drag the badge around, snap it back and forth.
That's so cool. Yeah, like I saw you were building one of those really sick like conference badge apps, and I was like, man, Amy's gonna crush it. You're good at all that stuff.
Well, what's funny is my original idea was to make it where you could put stickers on it. And like digital stickers. And then Vercel just released their next comp. And I was like, that was my idea. But it's kind of better that they're different, that's
for sure.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out with us. These are always fun episodes to record when we just get to, share our opinions. If you're listening to the audio version, please leave a rating and review. That helps other people find the podcast and allows us to keep doing what we're doing. So for now, that's all we've got. Okay, that was goodbye number 1. Do you have anything you want to add before I?
That's it.
Okay. No. I don't, I can't raid anybody if you're on Twitch. So go find somebody else cool. Clarkio is usually recording after us. We usually send people his way. So check that out. But otherwise we will catch you guys next week. Well, James will catch you next week.
Maybe.
Because I think, maybe. Brad and I will both be out. I'll be at the conference. So tune in. Actually, you can't tune in on Friday. That's a play day. Okay. Bye.
Bye, Twitch.